Today we're talking Severance, which a lot of people have said is The Office mixed with Friday the 13th. I'd throw a little Hills Have Eyes in there.
Yeah, there's a TV show called Severance, and it kind of kickstarted my brain like, oh, don't you remember the movie? Yeah, we should talk about this movie.
There's a bunch of movies that have Severance in the title. So when you said it to me, I was like, give me a year.
Yeah, I kind of have to do that way. Yeah. So we're going to do Severance 2006.
Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals to tell what movies we'll pick for future episodes. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. We're talking about 2006 horror movie Severance, my second favorite horror movie of the year.
Find out what that number one is. All right, so the sales division at Palisade Defense has been taken to the mountainous countryside for a team-building retreat. The weekend quickly goes wrong when the sales reps start being slaughtered, one by one.
Okay, Severance is kind of borrows a little bit of like Friday the 13th. You go in the woods, you go into areas that don't really belong. You're kind of in an environment that you're not adapting to, and you got a cast of characters, and each kind of has their own signature personality. It starts out very interesting way because you got them on the bus, but the bus, it's actually a cool bus. I really like this bus.
Yeah.
But you get this poppy song. I like the 60s song, this Ichigo Bark, but playing. It's almost, are we having a jovial time? But we know it's dire because we've seen the cover. We know it's dire, but the song
and
plays.
we've seen the first scene, which is, like the one
the
guy
very
running
first
with
scene,
the
before
two
the bus.
nearly naked women, and and again when we see the bus, we know they're not on it in that way, and I'm like,
yeah, because the lead is like, what? Yeah. So it's directed by Christopher Smith. Previous to that, he did a movie called Creep. Check that out. It's very interesting. I don't know if you've seen the movie Creep.
No, I've seen a different movie called Creep.
It has, what's her name from Run Lola Run? She's in the movie Creep
okay.
also. Detour Triangle was a surprise underground hit.
Yeah, we've talked about doing that one on the show even too.
Yes,
so Smith has been floating around our discussions for a while.
And The Banishing, I've heard some good things about with other critics about Banishing. I've yet to see that one.
No, that's a pandemic drop that I missed.
Okay. So also Christopher Smith and James Moran wrote this. James Moran started writing for Torchwood, if you knew Torchwood, if you're Doctor Who fans. He did one episode of Doctor Who, Fire from Pompeii, which is kind of funny because James Moran also read a short film called Descendants on Pompeii. Kind of booked in his career with Pompeii for some reason.
Seems to have an interest.
Well, British people always have this fascination with Pompeii. There's a short documentary film, like a list, I don't know, Roman history for British people.
Paul W.S. Anderson's film is a British man making the movie Pompeii.
There's also a little bit of references of Dr. Strangelove. So the bombs are called, the landmines are called CMI 114, which is a reference of a code in Dr. Strangelove, as well as that they think at the end of the movie they play Until We Meet Again.
Yeah, it's a different version of the song, of course, but it's like their version, if you will.
So there's a little bit of political commentary. This company is a weapons manufacturer, so they trade in weapons, almost like Tony Stark. But I don't think I think it's as a board, as a corporation, and they're going on this at the time in the early 2000s that these corporate retreats was popular.
Well, yeah, and this, following up on The Office, this is 2 years after The American Office, which followed 2 seasons and a television film of The British Office. So The Office was pretty prevalent on people's minds as they did this. So you can see that idea at play. James Moran as well. He'd written a film, Cockneys versus Zombies, which I have yet to catch.
I saw that, which is really weird.
But he also did kind of do the structure for an anthology film, and I think he wrote one of them too for a film called Minutes to Midnight, which is a very, very low budget kind of multiple viewpoints anthology. It's rather interesting. Some of them work, some of them don't. But you have that kind of idea where James Moran seems to very much have a realm for satire and horror. And then you get Christopher Smith, who had done some stuff previously, but it didn't seem like he was really pigeonholed into horror at that point, too. So there's a lot of, if you didn't know this film was getting to be a satirical, kind of a horror comedy, you might get lost in the shuffle before watching it because you don't really know what you're getting into. The poster does a good job. It's, the guy with the mug of coffee and it's got no head. Know?
And I remember renting it just knowing that was a horror movie, but I didn't understand how much comedy was good. I was unfamiliar with the people involved.
Oh, yeah.
And I realized the funny thing. Okay, so you have Danny Dreyer, who's actually still doing EastEnders. He's still in there.
He's done over 1,000 episodes of
EastEnders, right? He's the same age as I am. I'm 45, but he's playing this interesting how do I get in trouble kind of guy. Or
HR's worst nightmares.
HR worst nightmares. Yeah, he's one of the guys like the new rule in the office, and he's like, it's because of me, man.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
he's here to let you know somehow I'm still working here.
Which is he's put him in the back. But yeah, it's almost the beginning of the bus shows you visually shows you the hierarchy, the stature, and you got the overlay boss. Almost like the Steve Carell kind of guy.
Oh yeah, you can see the archetypes at play throughout this whole thing. Like you can see there was very much not even just Steve Carell, but just both versions of The Office supplanted. It's like they started writing an episode of The Office and then decided to delve into horror. Okay,
so I think the comedy, the pitches, the delivery, because it's a little bit surprise, but it's also the comedy is all like cringy a little bit. You know, get trapped in the bear trap, and then that happens.
Yeah.
But then you got to put the foot in the ice.
That's maybe my favorite joke in the entire film is the foot is just a little bit too big to fit in the fridge, which is kind of an Office joke itself of you bringing in the giant like lunch pail and shoving it into the fridge at the behest of everyone else.
Yes. So the gags and we always talk about there's a thin thread between comedy and horror, and it dances all the time. That it's funny for us, but it's devastating for the other people. But not to mention, there's also a lot of foreshadowing. They also talk about the guillotine. We are all both weapon killers, and all this stuff was a very, very unethical. That soul speech. He's like, what about the guillotine? That was,
Yeah. And he makes the joke that you can still see afterwards, and then we get that great, like, from the viewpoint shot of the death.
Yeah.
That leads into that as well. So, yeah, there's setups and payoffs, and the thing that you make a good point about horror comedies. They're very tough because there's really 4 groups of viewers for that. There's people where the comedy doesn't work. There's people where the horror doesn't work. There's people where both don't work. And then there's that 1/4 that gets both and that just rides it. And that's really tough to do because horror is very difficult because everyone's scared by something different. Comedy is very difficult because everyone laughs at different things. Getting a good cohesion is very tough.
Yeah, and especially in the woods, you kind of know that you're going to deal with something with the underground bunker. You just kind of know. We've seen enough horror movies.
I just wasn't sure who would end up being the villain of the film, because you expect when people make that comparison, The Office, plus Jason basically, then you're like, okay, I'm expecting like a mountain man kind of. That's why I make the comparison that Hills Have Eyes. It feels like the larger group, like you're entering a territory you shouldn't be in.
So I'm going to reference another movie. It's almost like Dog Soldiers, but that was, a bunch of military people exercise to do war games in the woods, but something disastrous happens. And here it's an office retreat out in the woods, property owned by the corporation. But then they're talking about this mythology that maybe the people that they held on to, and they like killing too much, and they're still stuck in the woods. Which is an interesting mythology that I like. The exposition that you kind of need. Yeah. So.
Yeah, definitely dances around with that kind of like, who is really out here for us, and they leave it as ambiguous as they can, for as long as they can.
Yeah. So I think it's tough to do effectively because where are you going to put this in your video rental store, or where are you going to sell it to your friends? Because it's a horror movie, but also there's enough comedy that you can put this in the comedy section. And then a lot of true horror fans are not going. They think you're diluting the process by making it a comedy. But then the people who like comedy, it's like it's a little too disgusting for me to enjoy as comedy because you have that small little window of people that enjoy both.
Yeah. And I happen to believe if you're going to make a horror comedy, it has to win at both. Like you have to have moments of scares and moments of comedy, or else it's just a comedy or just a horror that has like tinges. And so this would be a tough film to put on this shelf, especially because it seems like horror fans sometimes, not all of us, but horror fans sometimes tend to think horror comedy, that's weakening the brand.
Right,
that's
diluting.
That's taking away from what's really special about it. And I kind of think the exact opposite because so many horror films have bits of comedy.
Oh my God! Friday the 13th is
all
hilarious.
The Friday the 13th movies have one character that's just there to make jokes until he gets his head lopped off. So
I mean, you basically kill the guy by putting your hand through the shower and you push his nose into his brain.
Well, and not only that, Friday the 13th Part 8. I know it's like the much maligned sequel, but that also has a moment where a guy's head gets punched off his body, and we also get a viewpoint of the head flying through the air before it slams into a garbage bin.
That's comedy. Yeah, that's comedy.
So the homage is there, guys.
Yeah. So next up, our review.
So Severance for me is a movie that I think sets up a great idea and a great concept, but never really reaches the levels I expected it to. There's some great things I want to talk about first. I really like Laura Harris, the actress who played Maggie in the film.
Yeah,
I became
everybody
aware
likes
of
her. Yeah, everybody likes her.
Well, I became aware of her from The Faculty. She is the exchange student that joins up with the rest of the students in trying to stop the alien menace.
Is
in
that the
film.
Faculty with Josh Hartnett?
The Faculty, yeah, with Josh Hartnett, Elijah
good.
Wood, and such.
Yeah.
That was, I think, one of the first things I'd seen her in, and she's done this and a few other things around the bend too. So, but on that end, she plays more of the naivety. Here, she's able to kind of actually play a role. You know, her
She's
character is
the
usually hidden.
right. We're reviewing. She's the final girl, but she was also kind of. Well, she's not the conscious. The other one's kind of the conscious to know this is gonna be a disaster.
Yeah, she's the one who's more. I guess she's anti-trope because she feels like she's going to go one way, and she ends up playing a bunch of different characters in the film.
Right.
I also really liked Andy Nyman. He's the guy who played Gordon, the guy who loses the.
Oh,
foot.
he's got the. Let's do it, team. Come on.
I love Andy Nyman in a lot of the films he's been in. In fact, I've kind of been unaware of him until recently.
Well, that's because he does a lot of voiceover.
Yeah. But I saw a film he did called Ghost Stories a couple years ago where he plays a guy who's basically going around getting ghost stories from people for, I believe it's a podcast, and then he ends up kind of uncovering that something actually might be real to it. Now that is a very good comedy that ends up in horror. He also appeared in Judy. I think he did some voice work for The Last Jedi. So Andy Nyman has been really floating around
Yeah, he was like a
the
stormtrooper
bird for a while.
Right, yeah.
And I really liked him in this film too. He kind of felt like Dwight from The Office kind of character of the guy who's got all the rules.
Little more approachable, Dwight.
Yeah.
Dwight's a little more hard-shelled, defensive. And then Andy Newman's playing a little more. Come on, guys.
The
I
thing
want to
about
be your friend.
that's
first.
what I like about him though is he's kind of like, well, we're all in this together, aren't we? But then he's like, but don't break the rules when you're paintballing. Like he's got this,
And
got
they
this
all-
like, rule scheme,
And of course, when you say that, everybody's gonna.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you don't do that. I don't care if you got glasses on
Right.
or not. You don't taunt the paintballers.
Yeah.
But yeah, those elements, I thought those actors were pretty good. I just don't feel like when people started getting picked off, I was expecting it to, I guess, lean into the satire a little bit more, and I think the horror elements kind of failed at that point for me personally.
Well, right. For the second time viewing, I was like, why is this doesn't seem so memorable to me? Because a lot of kills seem unforgettable, and I think it's just because we know how the dominoes are going to fall.
See, I thought the order was different than expected, at least.
Well, you know that manager guy, because we go soft, and then you go the people that are like, oh no. And
Yeah.
then, yeah.
But
So,
like Toby Stevens Harris, who I've only ever really seen him play bad guys or at least dirtbags.
Yeah.
And so having him appear in the film, and he's kind of like riding that line of dirtbag, which I kind of appreciate. Having him be the first pick-off was a bit shocking to me because, again, usually you lose someone you really, really like early on in these kinds of films. You leave the dirtbags till the end.
They don't do that to this one.
Yeah.
But it does feel, I know who the last two are going to be.
That's fair.
I kind of do know.
Yeah.
When I first watched that. And that's what kind of, I didn't have, I know the journey process. What I did like about it is a little surprise. Where's this cake, the pie come from? I just made it. And they find that there's,
Yeah, there's definite moments in it where I'm like, oh, I see. Okay, we're going somewhere here. Like the pie scene, I thought was really good because it's one of those. I don't know that there's a Child's Play sequel that has a soup scene very similar.
Right, yeah. But they're having a nice moment. They're actually getting along, and then that breaks it up.
Yeah.
So we're talking about that. Actually, if I put in my notes, if the horror event did not transpire, it would have been an effective, probably, retreat.
Probably, yeah.
Because they probably got they didn't go to the right destination.
Yeah.
They went probably to the right one because the guy's been waiting there the entire weekend.
Yeah. Again, like there are so many things where I think I feel like we're comfortably entering into a strong place with the narrative, and then it kind of veers away from that a little bit. Where, like a really great moment, that popping the foot inside the mini fridge, I think is one of those scenes you could have done for 10 minutes and I would have been giggling still. Very inappropriately giggling. Right. But then you also get a great moment of Richard, played by Tim McInerney, who is he's the
I like
boss.
his performance.
I was surprised by him because, again, he's kind of that guy who's taking the I don't want to be wrong route the whole film, which is very much a boss thing to do. And as a boss, I understand that from my years of being manager.
Well, he gives that when he's on the porch, and he gives that look of, I should say I need help, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
and it's going to ruin everything. And they know better than they know a better solution than he
when
does.
you work in management, you are so trained to be like, you can never pretend like you don't know what you're doing, and you can never pretend like you need help. And so I understand wholeheartedly where he's coming from with that, and having that moment where he gets to truly be a leader. And by that being, he's on the landmine, and he doesn't go with them. He leaves himself there because he knows that if I go with them, I'm endangering
he's on the
them.
1 foot line. Yeah.
And then he's like, he gets that moment where he's like, I'm gonna be the savior here.
And it's not even. It doesn't. And even him being the savior does not really go effectively.
It's not terribly well, but
No.
it's nice to see that he's trying.
I mean, even the bad guy's like, okay, all right.
He picks out. He takes 1 or 2 out. That's all you can really hope for.
So that's what the charm of it is the clumsiness of the people involved, because they're not all of a sudden you don't have the effective turn of I'm going to be Rambo now, and you have this effectiveness like Genny Dyer's character. Well, you just want to get high, guys, just
Yeah.
But that's just kind of his combat. So you don't have this overall like 80s like all of a sudden they're going to arsenal up, which I thought you would see because they're a weaponized company. But all of them are so clumsy outside their elements that they kind of retain that a little bit. And they're clumsy even in their conversations with them because they're so used to having an office environment.
Yeah.
I think that's
the choice in writing to kind of play off the ideals. Like we have weapons experts, they should be at least if they're selling, but they can't handle a weapon, they can't handle themselves in the real world.
Yeah.
It's a clever idea that I just don't think is fully realized. And again, we go back to I had a feeling that Steve and Maggie were going to be our last characters, and I don't find Steve a likable or interesting character. I found Maggie to be. So it's like when he's there, I'm just like, I kind of want him to just.
Well, he's the
explode,
Harpo Marx, the character just clumsy falls everything, and I think they need to build up on him having surprise, maybe something in his pockets that he doesn't, something that is talent he's unaware of.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying going back, but something that you just not stand there with a joint in your hand going, I just want to get high.
Yeah.
Even though that's funny, but you have to have some kind of talent that all right, so he fails his way up through the whole process, but show how he just kind of has a little bit of talent to enjoy the...
I would have liked it if they had maybe played him off as getting killed and then somehow he just like stumbled into living. Like he just accidentally survives everything. But he's kind of just placed in this area where I just wasn't very interested in what he was doing. I would have liked to have seen Maggie teamed up with Billy, played by, I'm going to get the name wrong, Babu Sise.
Right.
As Billy. I thought he was a pretty engaging, likable lead. Who would have been fun to see him paired off with Maggie because, again, we want the people that we like to survive, and I just didn't ever really like Steve. I get the idea of he's the guy who made the HR rules what they are. I don't really like those guys too much either.
But the most effective thing that was supposed to be funny was the rocket thing.
Yeah, the rocket scene is, again, another good scene.
A good scene, but you have just hold on for the little second, and you have to show a little more disaster.
Yeah, I was hoping to see that plane actually, come down.
Show the
and
plane.
Maybe kill the entire
And then
group of bad guys.
At least have a moment where the bad guys and the good guys share a moment where they're like...
Yeah.
At least they have some kind of connection to each other instead of just standing there and observing. So if you want to shoot it, I mean, obviously, because when that happens, they squarely go on Steve and her. Where I would show at least the bad guys turning like, you're badass, man. I mean, yeah.
Like maybe give him props. Again, I don't know that.
Or applaud, like, yeah, good job, idiot.
It feels like a comedy that morphed into a horror, by the end, where I don't know if the comedy was... It seemed to disappear almost when the horror elements really took over, and there was a few fleeting moments.
Well, that's the nature of... When you do a movie like this, that's the nature of our dialogue, is where's the balance? Is it balance? Because... Is it too much horror, too much comedy?
Yeah, and like I said, that's a very tough thing to do. Like, the film didn't work for me, but I can see it working for other people because you can flip a coin on the comedy, and someone may find the comedy to make up for horror issues. You can flip a coin on the horror, and someone may think it's horrifying enough that they don't care that it's trying to be a comedy. Or you might find that golden child of, I loved both elements of the film. It's very tough to do, and for this one, it did not push that threshold for me.
And so I think, like you said, for your point of view, you need to clean up the little bit of the clumsiness. Maybe have a little more obvious of where it's going for the horror. And
that does help a bit when you're doing horror comedy because then you can focus on the comedy of the situation. But I don't know if I needed it to surprise me or not. It just felt like a little trite in terms of like where it was headed was very obvious from the get-go, and it was a place I was uninterested in going.
Well, when you're on mushrooms and you think there's a bear, it might be a bear.
Yeah, that's fair. See, it does teach you survival skills in that way. The one thing I was thinking about this film is there is a film that, as far as concept goes, feels very similar to this that came out recently. And it's one that I actually really praised when I saw it back in 2020. It was called The Hunt, which got a lot of like irksome political hatred. And the film is not one side or the other politically. It actually hates everyone pretty well. But it was sold as a film that seemed to hate Democrats, and then it was sold as a film that hated Republicans, and it was like, no, it just hates everyone. Yeah. The Hunt is a very funny horror comedy action kind of a thing that I think does the idea of people that shouldn't be involved in a backwoods kind of melee and takes it up a notch. I think it works a little bit better. Now, granted, they're both doing different things. This film, Severance, is about the weapons industry, and that film is about the political ideologies. But I think Hunt works a little bit better with where my mindset is at.
Right. Yeah. I just think the script need to clean up a little bit. If there's a company that has a weapon manufacturer, at least they have an arsenal somewhere. Yeah. And they can handle it.
Because clearly the backwoods guys have their arsenal.
Yeah, their arsenal. They can retaliate. But it'll show how clumsy they are because they're office people. Or maybe the stuff that we're making design is a piece of crap,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's kind of the idea that we get that with Iron Man, where we're like, his weapons are very, very powerful in what they do. And as he, sells in Stark Industries is a defense company. All defense companies are just weapons companies that don't want to say they're weapons companies. And so, like, you have all these ins where you could really hint at it. And I think in a post-Iron Man world, this film would work a little bit better because they'd have more. They'd kind of get a blueprint for, like, it worked in that film, let's do it here.
Yeah.
I just think it was maybe a little too, it's underdeveloped.
Right. I'm still sticking with my second favorite horror because there's
What was your first?
Behind the Mask.
Oh, okay. All right. I was like trying to think about that.
And that's a little bit of comedy. That's a parody on the horror movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going with a certain way with horror movies in 2006, where we kind of tapped out on making everything disgusting. Let's make fun of it. Yeah. So, have you seen Severance?
Yes, Severance 2006.
Right, you gotta get that right. Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts on the film down below. And were you someone where the comedy worked, the horror worked, both worked? We'd love to hear your options.
Comedy worked a little bit more than the horror. The horror is a little more telegraph for me.
Yeah.
But that's me.
That's fair.
If you disagree, please let me know.
I lean a bit towards
I like talking movies, so if you disagree, let me know.
Yeah, we appreciate all of our commenters out there. That's the whole goal of the show, is to create the movie experience between all of us, because we can talk a lot, but so can we, and so can you. So please comment down below your thoughts on the film. Make sure you like and subscribe. There are 2 free things that you can do that help to support the channel.
Oh my God,
immensely.
it helps out, man.
Yeah, you never miss new episodes of the show as we have them on Mondays, Thursdays, Saturdays. We've got episodes all the time for you. We also have additional episodes if you're all caught up. Join the Patreon. Yeah, do it. One of us. Yeah. So you can join for Picks with Kyle and Nick, as well as our Road to De Palma show, where Nick and I break down a Brian De Palma film every single month for Patreons only. So that tier is at $1 and up. You can join at that level. Yeah, thank you guys for joining us so very much. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show at the St. Paul Filmcast anywhere you find podcasts. So, yeah. Don't go in the woods.
No, not unless you're here for a treat. No, even if you're here for a retreat.